Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. Tonight I want you to imagine something deeply intimate. The soft rustle of sheets, a quiet breath shared in the dark. Two souls reaching for each other, not just in body but in spirit. In the privacy of a bedroom, a husband and a wife come together in one of the most sacred acts of love and unity. It's tender, powerful, emotional. But what if I told you you're not always alone? It's not fear I want to stir in you. It's awareness. In cultures around the world, particularly in the Islamic tradition, there is this ancient, almost whispered belief that jinn, invisible beings of smokeless fire, can enter the bedroom during moments of intimacy. Some call it superstition. Others know it through stories their mothers told them in hushed tones, or from the silence of unexplained emotional heaviness that lingers afterward. But what is the spiritual truth? Is this just myth meant to shame or control? Or is there something far deeper happening in the unseen? Something tied to energy, intention, and the power of presence? We're not here to judge or to sensationalize. We're here to understand what intimacy truly means, what it opens in us, and what it exposes around us. So if you've ever felt watched when you should have felt safe, or you've wondered why something sacred sometimes feels unsettled, stay with me. Because in this video, we're going to talk about the spiritual truth behind this mystery and what it means for the love you share. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to my channel. I want to begin by asking you something quietly vulnerable. Have you ever laid beside the one you love, skin against skin, the warmth of their breath melting into yours, and yet, in the stillness of that moment, something felt slightly off, like the air held more than just passion, like it carried something unseen, something uninvited. It's strange, isn't it? That in moments meant to be drenched in love, trust, and release there could be a silent watcher, not of flesh and blood, but of flame and shadow, the kind of presence you can't see but might sense, lingering at the edge of your awareness. You see, in the Western world, intimacy is often reduced to biology, its bodies, its pleasure, its performance. But in many spiritual traditions, and especially within Islam, intimacy is an energy exchange, a spiritual alignment. And with that comes a kind of vulnerability that goes beyond the physical. It opens doors, not just to love, but sometimes to other realms. Tonight, we're going to gently peel back those layers. This isn't a sermon, it's not superstition. It's an invitation to understand what really happens when two people unite, not just with their bodies, but with their spirits. And yes, we're going to talk about jinn, not as monsters under the bed, but as energetic beings whose curiosity often leads them where the veil is thinnest. So let's take a deep breath together. This isn't about fear, it's about reclaiming awareness. Let's begin here, with the bedroom, that deeply personal space, the sanctuary of love. For most couples, especially those married and sharing a home, it's the one room where emotional vulnerability meets physical surrender. But here's something we don't often talk about. What is the energy of that space? Have you ever walked into your bedroom after an argument and felt the walls holding the tension? Have you ever stepped into the room and sensed a weight, even if nothing visibly changed? That's the thing. Energy lingers, it's invisible, but it's real. And jinn, well, they're energy-sensitive beings. In Islamic belief, jinn are creatures created from smokeless fire. They exist in a parallel world, hidden from our eyes, but capable of seeing us. Some are mischievous, some are neutral, others harmful. They live, they marry, they eat, they die, they envy, they watch. And sometimes, they enter places uninvited, drawn by things we often ignore. The Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, gave clear teachings about this. One of the most well-known hadiths speaks of saying a particular prayer, Bismillah, before intimacy. And do you know why? Because when you speak that name, when you say, in the name of God, you are consciously closing that invisible door. You are acknowledging, we are not alone, but we are not inviting you. There's a sweetness in that, isn't there? It's not just a ritual, it's a boundary, a shield of light around something sacred. But most people never think about this. Because we live in a time where spiritual etiquette has been replaced by convenience. We rush into love, we rush into touch, we forget that our bodies are not just flesh, they're gateways. And when a gateway opens without intention, anything can pass through. Now let's talk about one of the biggest misconceptions. People assume that jinn only enter a bedroom if something sinful is happening, like premarital intimacy or immoral behavior. But that's not entirely true. Even in lawful, loving unions, husband and wife, jinn can be present if the right spiritual hygiene is not maintained. Because it's not about judgment, it's about awareness. Have you ever noticed couples who feel emotionally drained after intimacy? Or who begin to experience strange disturbances in their home, not loud bangs or haunted theatrics, but subtle things, dreams that unsettle. Feelings of being watched, a sudden coldness between them for no reason. Sometimes it's stress, sometimes it's just life, but other times it's a spiritual imbalance that began when they opened a door and forgot to close it. Now I want you to think about intimacy not just as pleasure, but as power. When two people unite in love, especially in a bonded spiritual relationship, there's an enormous energy that's created. That energy is attractive, not just to each other, but to whatever moves through the spaces around them. Just like light attracts insects in the dark, your intimacy emits a kind of light, sometimes bright, sometimes chaotic. And if it isn't wrapped in protection, something may draw near that doesn't belong. And here's where it gets even more fascinating. In many traditions, and in countless personal accounts across cultures, it's said that jinn are attracted to places of heightened emotion, rage, grief, lust, even ecstasy. Not because those emotions are evil, but because they are loud. And in a spiritual sense, the louder your emotions, the more visible you become to the unseen. So think about your bedroom. Is it a place where you argue, scroll endlessly on your phone, carry your work, or invite distractions? Or is it a place that has been intentionally crafted as a sanctuary for your connection? Because what you allow into your space emotionally, energetically, becomes the atmosphere in which your intimacy breathes. There's a reason why certain scholars advise keeping the bedroom clean, avoiding mirrors facing the bed, turning off music during intimacy, and beginning with a prayer. Not because these are blind rituals, but because they quiet the noise, they lower your spiritual volume. They allow intimacy to unfold between two people, not three. And that brings us to the deeper truth. It's not about fear, it's about creating sacredness. When you prepare for intimacy as something sacred, not just physical, you begin to experience it differently. It becomes more connected, more present. You slow down, you feel more. You listen not just to your partner's breath, but to their soul. And that awareness, it's protective, because jinn thrive where attention is absent, where presence is missing. They slip into the cracks of distraction, of detachment, of unconscious moments. But presence, deep, loving, intentional presence, is a light they cannot bear. So ask yourself, when you enter into that act of union, are you rushing through it like a checklist? Or are you arriving into it fully with reverence? It begins with a simple word, Bismillah, and from there the room changes. The air thickens with peace. The space becomes a container, not just for bodies, but for connection, safety, and something divine. And just like that, you've drawn the curtains on the invisible. You've said, this is ours, this is sacred. You may not enter. What fascinates me most about intimacy isn't just what the body does. It's what the soul reveals when the armor of the day is finally removed. That's the secret, isn't it? In the dark, under a blanket, you are no longer the parent, the professional, the polished version of yourself. You are raw, you are exposed, and you are deeply open, not just to your partner, but to what the world cannot see. And that, my dear listener, is where the conversation deepens. Let's talk about what actually happens when you enter into that most vulnerable act without intention. Think of intimacy like water. If you pour it into a clean glass, you can drink it with confidence. But if the glass is dirty, uncared for, neglected, filled with past residue, then no matter how pure the water is, it becomes unsafe. Your bedroom is that glass. The energy you allow into it, the unresolved emotions you carry into it, the spiritual noise that has collected, they shape the quality of your union. Now, what many don't realize is that jinn are often drawn not to the act itself, but to the energy around it. And that energy can be very telling. Is this an act of love or control? Is this a moment of union or escape? Are you present or are you performing? Because when there is disconnection between two people, emotional tension, lack of trust, suppressed anger, the space becomes fractured. And where there is a fracture, something can slip in. I once had a woman tell me in a counseling session that she and her husband had a beautiful relationship during the day, but every time they were intimate, she'd feel a heavy presence in the room. At first, she thought it was just stress. Then she blamed fatigue. But the feeling wouldn't go away. It grew louder. And eventually, it started to affect how she viewed her body, her desire, her safety. She wasn't crazy. She wasn't overthinking. She was spiritually sensitive. You see, some people can sense the shift in energy the moment something unseen enters the room. Others may not notice it until later, through disturbing dreams, a change in mood, or a subtle emotional distance that wasn't there before. And in many cases, that energy lingers. It attaches not because you're sinful, but because you're unaware, because the room was left open. Let's bring this closer to home. Think about mirrors. They're just glass, right? But in spiritual tradition, mirrors are seen as portals. Reflectors, multipliers of energy. That's why in some cultures, mirrors are covered when someone dies, because they're believed to capture the soul's reflection as it departs. So now imagine having a mirror facing your bed, one that reflects every act of intimacy, not just to the walls, but to the unseen. Again, it's not about paranoia, it's about awareness. The same applies to what we watch, what we listen to, what we bring into that space. Is the bedroom a sacred zone, or is it a passive extension of your phone, your emails, your open tabs? Because the bedroom was never meant to be a theater for distraction. It was meant to be a temple of connection, and temples require preparation. In Islamic tradition, there's a very simple but profound guidance before intimacy. Say the name of God. Not to suppress desire, but to sanctify it, to claim the space, to say, what is about to happen here is not just physical, it is soul meeting soul, and it must be protected. That prayer isn't long, but it shifts everything. It tells the spiritual world, this union is watched over. And that subtle barrier, that cloak of intention, is often enough to keep wandering entities from drawing near. Now let's turn inward into the human psychology of it. Sometimes the jinn aren't even external. They are the shadows we carry inside us. The pain, the memories, the wounds from past lovers, past betrayals, past fears. And when we unite with someone without healing those wounds, it's not just two people in the room. It's the ghost of everyone we haven't released. Energy is sticky like that. So a husband may come to his wife in love, but she feels dread. Not because of him, but because of something unhealed in her. A wife may try to connect with her husband, but he shuts down, not because of her, but because his heart still whispers the name of a woman who left. And in that moment, even if the bodies move, the spirits remain guarded. And where there is disconnection, there is room for interference. So much of this conversation is about bringing attention back to what we've neglected: the emotional atmosphere, the spiritual temperature, the need for closure, not just with people, but with energy. Now imagine a couple who lights a candle before they unite, who turns off the noise, who looks at each other not just to seduce, but to see, who speaks a prayer not out of duty, but out of love, who treats the bed not as a battlefield or a stage, but as an altar. Can you feel how different that is? That kind of union emits a completely different energy, one that doesn't invite watchers, but guardians, one that doesn't echo with tension, but with peace, one that leaves you feeling safe, not exposed. Because intimacy, in its truest form, is a sacred exchange, and like anything sacred, it deserves protection. This isn't about becoming hyper-spiritual or paranoid about jinn. It's about remembering that we are never fully alone, that we live in layered dimensions, that what we do in the physical has consequences in the spiritual, and the sooner we honor that, the sooner our relationships begin to heal, not just on the surface, but in the soul. I want to talk for a moment about the role of desire. In many traditions, desire has been feared, suppressed, treated like a fire that must be extinguished. But desire is not the enemy. Unconscious desire is. When we act on desire without grounding, without protection, without presence, we become vulnerable. Not because desire is wrong, but because it's powerful, and anything powerful must be wielded with care. You wouldn't drive a car blindfolded. You wouldn't enter a storm without shelter. So why would you open your body, your spirit, your energy without intention? I'm not saying to overthink every moment of pleasure. I'm saying to bring meaning back into it. To see that your bedroom is not just where you sleep, it's where you create, where you connect, where you reveal the most tender, unguarded parts of yourself. And that sacredness deserves more than silence. It deserves reverence. There's a reason why intimacy is one of the most spiritually powerful acts two people can share. It's not just biology, it's covenant, it's chemistry wrapped in purpose. It's the kind of connection that leaves echoes, and what kind of echo you leave, peaceful or disturbed, depends on how you entered. So many couples come to me asking, why do I feel distant from my partner, even after we've been close? And often, the answer lies not in the act, but in the atmosphere. Were you present? Were you conscious? Did you begin with peace or with performance? Because when your body says yes, but your spirit says nothing, you create a vacuum. And vacuums don't stay empty. Something always rushes in to fill them. So I invite you as a couple, as lovers, as spiritual beings, to begin practicing conscious intimacy. Say the prayer, close the doors, clear the room, turn off the mirrors if you must, and most importantly, be present with your partner, with your breath, with your God, because the most powerful protection is awareness. And when you are truly aware, truly connected, truly reverent, nothing uninvited can stay. There's a soft kind of magic that happens when two people love each other with their full selves. It's not always fireworks or passion that roars. It's the silence afterward. The way your fingers don't let go, the stillness that lingers in the room, like a shared breath between two souls who just trusted each other with everything. And in that silence, there's a question we rarely ask. What did we just invite? Was it connection or was it consequence? Because intimacy is never neutral. It either deepens your bond or weakens it. It either cleanses the space between you or clouds it. And so often, when couples feel distant after intimacy, not just emotionally, but spiritually, it's because something entered that moment which had no business being there. We talked about jinn as watchers, but let's talk now about jinn as whisperers. Because sometimes they don't just observe, they interfere. You wake up and suddenly feel tension with your spouse that wasn't there the day before. Your partner becomes colder, less present, more agitated. You start doubting yourself. Resentments begin to bloom from places you can't trace. You think it's just miscommunication, but it might be deeper. It might be a seed planted by something unseen during a moment you thought was sacred. And this is where the spiritual intersects with the psychological. You see, jinn don't just attack with shadows or sounds. They often attack with suggestion, with whispering, with subtle shifts in the emotional current between two people. And when your relationship already has wounds, when you're not fully healed, not fully present, those whispers find fertile ground. They say things like, she doesn't love you anymore. He's just using you. She's cold. He doesn't care. They feed on insecurity. They drink from the well of your silence. And the only way to disarm them is with light. Light in the form of clarity, prayer, intention, and most of all love. Not performative love, not transactional love, but the kind of love that looks into the eyes of the other and says, I see you, I choose you, and I protect this space with you. That's what most couples forget. That intimacy is not just about the act, it's about the environment in which that act is born, the safety of the container, the purity of the intention, the clarity of the emotions behind it. So let me ask you something. What would it look like for you to reclaim your bedroom as a sacred space, not just through rituals, but through presence? What would it feel like to enter into intimacy not with tension or routine, but with reverence? To cleanse your space, not just physically, but energetically. To start your evening not with scrolling, but with stillness. To light a candle and let it burn like a quiet witness. To look at your partner and say, let's slow down, let's be here, together, fully. Because that's the kind of energy Jinn cannot bear. They don't thrive in environments of peace. They don't flourish where there is light. They whisper when you are disconnected. But when two people are connected, spirit to spirit, heart to heart, it's like closing every window and locking every door. And the most powerful lock is prayer. Not out of fear, but out of love. Bismillah. With just one word, you draw a line in the sand, you name your boundaries, you name your protector, you name your presence, and that single word changes the texture of the moment. It becomes intentional. It becomes divine. There's a deeper truth I want you to take with you. Your bedroom isn't just where you lay your head. It's where your legacy begins. It's where love is built or broken. Where new life is conceived, not just in the womb, but in the heart. And when you treat that space as holy, your relationship starts to reflect that holiness. Now, if you've had experiences that felt unsettling, if you've ever felt a heaviness during or after intimacy, or a dream that chilled you, or a sudden drop in connection between you and your spouse, don't dismiss it. Don't run from it. Sit with it. Ask yourself, what energy did we invite into our space? And then begin the work of clearing it. Together, you don't need elaborate rituals. You don't need fear. You need intention. You need to speak the words of protection that have been handed down for centuries. You need to cleanse your space with prayer, with forgiveness, with presence. And if you feel like something has already taken root, then cleanse with love. Turn your bedroom into a sanctuary again. Remove the chaos. Close the spiritual doors you left open. Rebuild trust. Rebuild presence. Rebuild your connection with God, because spiritual interference has no power over people who are truly united. And that is the beauty of sacred union. It's not about perfection. It's about alignment. When you are emotionally aligned, spiritually aware, and deeply connected, no jinn, no whisper, no shadow can touch the purity of your love. Let your intimacy be a form of worship. Let it be a space where you both feel safe to shed the layers of the world and find each other again. Let it be slow. Let it be intentional. Let it be light. And never forget, you were not created to live in fear of the unseen. You were created to walk in authority over it. So take back your bedroom. Reclaim your space. Protect your connection and enter into intimacy like it was always meant to be, sacred, safe, and full of love. Because when you love with presence, you close every door to what doesn't belong. There's a kind of sorrow that doesn't scream. It doesn't break dishes or slam doors. It lives quietly like a slow leak in the soul. And I've seen it too many times in the eyes of people who once made love with devotion and now can't even look at each other without flinching. They'll say, we don't know what happened. We used to be so connected. They'll say, we're not fighting. We're just tired. But when I listen closely, what I hear is this: something else began to live in the space between them. Something they didn't invite, but allowed to stay. And that's where it gets delicate, because not every intimacy killer looks like infidelity or abuse. Sometimes it looks like subtle spiritual decay, like invisible hands pushing hearts just far enough apart that love no longer flows freely. You see, the most dangerous interference isn't the one that slams into your life. It's the one that walks in slowly, with whispers and wait. That makes your partner's touch feel unfamiliar. That wraps your love in fog. That changes the air of the room. And when couples don't understand this, they turn against each other. They say, you've changed. You're not as affectionate. You never initiate anymore. But what if the truth is more complex? What if, over time, energy you never asked for settled into your sacred space? What if the lack of protection, the emotional negligence, the spiritual forgetfulness left the door open too long, and now something else is sleeping beside you? I remember speaking to a man once who confessed that after years of marriage, he still felt a kind of tightness in his chest after being with his wife. Not guilt, not shame, just tightness, and anxiety he couldn't name. He said, it's like the act is fine, but the aftermath, I feel drained, and that's it. That's the clue. Drained, not fulfilled, distant, not soothed, haunted, not held. These are the moments we ignore because we're too polite to say something's off. but the soul always knows. There are jinn, those from the unseen world, who are drawn not just to lust, but to emotional vulnerability, especially where trauma resides. If either partner is carrying unresolved wounds, especially sexual trauma or generational shame, the energy of that trauma can attract watchers, attachments, entities that are not evil but opportunistic. They stay where brokenness festers. And sometimes they don't just watch, they mimic, they imitate your partner's voice in your mind, subtly twisting the way you hear them. Suddenly you don't believe in their love. You become suspicious, cold, distracted, and you think it's you or them. But neither of you know how to name the interference, because what started as a whisper became a presence. I've seen women who cannot climax because something in their body shuts down as soon as pleasure nears, not because they don't desire their partner, but because something in the spiritual memory of their body says, this is not safe. I've seen men who go numb emotionally during sex and afterward avoid their wives, not with anger, but with ghost-like detachment. These are not just psychological. These are spiritual disruptions that have been left unspoken, untreated, and unprotected for too long. Now, the good news is this. What entered silently can also be removed silently, but it begins with attention. The spiritual world doesn't need shouting. It responds to presence, intention, clarity. So if your bedroom has become a place of avoidance, if the energy feels off, or the love feels rehearsed, it's time to cleanse, not just the sheets or the walls, but the space between you. Cleanse the unspoken tension, the shame, the guilt, the grief. Cleanse the way you've been showing up. And that starts by talking. When was the last time you and your spouse spoke openly about how you both feel during intimacy? Not what works or what positions you like, but the feeling. Do you feel safe, loved, seen? Do you feel watched or uneasy or disconnected? Because vulnerability is the doorway to healing. And once that door is open, the light comes in. You might be wondering, how do I even begin to spiritually cleanse our intimacy? Start small. Before intimacy, say a prayer. Say it together if you can. Make the moment sacred. Not stiff or robotic, just intentional. Speak the words. God, protect us from anything that does not belong in this space. That's it. After intimacy, say another prayer of gratitude. Light a small candle. Let your body rest in stillness for a few moments. And do you know what that does? It seals the energy. It closes the door that might have remained ajar. Next, clean the physical space. Remove clutter, especially around your bed. Spiritual clutter often mirrors physical clutter. Clear out anything that holds past memories, resentment, or unspoken pain. Remove mirrors directly facing your bed. In many spiritual traditions, they are believed to multiply energy, even reflect portals. This is not folklore. It's about minimizing energetic noise. Keep Koan recitation or peaceful spiritual sound in your space, something that purifies. Not loud, not aggressive, just consistent. A gentle spiritual heartbeat in the background of your shared life. And finally, return to each other. Touch with intention. Kiss like it means something. Don't just chase climax, chase connection. Because love, when honored, is the most powerful light against darkness. Your intimacy, when protected, becomes an act of worship, a fortress of emotional healing, a source of spiritual grounding, a container that says, we are not perfect, but we are present. And Jinn cannot stay where light lives. So if you've lost your connection, don't assume love is gone. It might just be hiding behind years of unspoken energy, whispered doubts, emotional dust. Love doesn't leave easily, but it does retreat when the room becomes crowded. Make space again. Hold hands before anything else. Pray before pleasure. Speak after silence. And begin again. Not as strangers, but as lovers who are no longer willing to be host to anything uninvited. Your bedroom deserves peace. Your intimacy deserves light. And your union deserves to be the only thing present when you meet, skin to skin, soul to soul. There's a moment after the storm of emotion has passed where the truth becomes unbearably clear, where you realize that all this time you weren't broken. You were simply unaware. No one taught you that love needs guarding, that connection is sacred, that desire must be honored not just with passion but with protection. And now you know, not in fear, but in love. Because once you recognize that there's more to the bedroom than pillows and pleasure, once you see that your union is not just physical, but spiritual, you begin to move differently. You start choosing awareness over assumption, intention over habit, light over shadows. And that shift, however small it may seem, begins to heal everything. Maybe for years you've gone through the motions. Maybe you've confused physical closeness with emotional safety. Maybe you've tried to reignite passion with perfume, with toys, with technique. But nothing seemed to reach the core, because passion without presence is just friction. It burns, but it doesn't last. Real intimacy, the kind that heals, transforms, and protects, only happens when both people arrive, fully, body, mind, spirit. And so the first step is returning, coming back to the space between you, coming back to the bed not as a battlefield of unmet expectations, but as a sacred meeting ground, one where your vulnerabilities are welcome, one where nothing unseen has been invited, one where your love is safe again. You have the power to shift that energy. When you walk into your room, pause. Close your eyes. Say a name that brings you peace. Ask for protection. Ask for clarity. Then look at your partner, not with the eyes of routine, but with the eyes of reverence. This is the person who has chosen you, the person you've chosen, the one who sees you in your most unguarded, undone state, who holds your flaws, who touches your wounds, who knows your rhythms. This person is your mirror and your refuge. Don't let interference rewrite that story, because jinn are not just myth, they are metaphors for distraction, for trauma, for the unspoken pain that sits between lovers when communication stops, for the lingering energy that enters when the door stays open too long. And when we speak of spiritual interference, we're not always talking about dark spirits with glowing eyes. We're talking about emotional drift, the numbness that comes from years of neglected intimacy, the invisible presence of shame, the weight of unresolved fights, the tension from inherited beliefs about pleasure, desire, worth. These things are jinn too, not in form, but in function. And when you don't name them, they multiply. But here's the beautiful truth. You don't need to fight them with fire. You fight them with presence, with connection, with prayer, with love so honest, so grounded, so sacred that no shadow dares stay. I want you to remember this. Your body is not sinful. Your desire is not shameful. Your need for connection is not weakness. It is human, divine, created, and your relationship deserves to feel that way again. So tonight, as you close this video, don't rush into intimacy. Walk into your room as if entering a sacred space. Sit with your partner. Hold their hand not to initiate, but to reconnect. Speak honestly about what you feel. The fear, the distance, the longing, the things you haven't said because life got too busy. Say a prayer, not because it's tradition, but because it's protection. A way of saying, this space is ours. No other energies are welcome here. And then love, not fast, not goal-oriented, but slow, present, devoted. Let your fingers trace new lines on old skin. Let your eyes linger. Let your souls meet first. Because when you meet like that, the room becomes brighter, the silence more sacred, the energy cleansed. And if you do feel a heaviness, if something does feel off, don't panic. Don't accuse. Just pause. Acknowledge it. Speak it. Then gently clear it again with prayer, with light, with patience, because intimacy is a journey, not a destination, and spiritual protection isn't a one-time act, it's a practice. Let love be that practice. Let love be your barrier, your healing, your exhale. And let me tell you something I've seen over and over. The moment a couple reclaims their sacredness, when they treat their union as something to protect, not just perform, everything changes. The emotional walls begin to crumble, the trust deepens, the desire returns, not because of novelty, but because of presence. And the jinn, the whispers, the unseen interference, they have no choice but to leave, because light doesn't argue with darkness, it just shines. So tonight, let your room be filled with light. Let your love be louder than fear. Let your union become the sacred act it was always meant to be. Because in the end, the greatest protection isn't the words you speak or the rituals you perform. It's the love you carry, the presence you bring, the intention you hold. And when you enter into that space, not as strangers crossing paths, but as lovers choosing each other again and again, nothing uninvited can stay. You are safe. You are seen. You are loved. Now go and protect that love with everything you've got. And if this message touched something in you, if it awakened the truth you've been needing to hear, share your story in the comments. Not because it's easy, but because it's healing. Your vulnerability gives permission to others, and your honesty may be the light someone else was waiting for. Like this video, subscribe to the channel, share it with someone whose relationship deserves protection and presence, because every love story deserves a sacred space. Here's to yours.